If you enjoy Volume 1 of my weird and forgotten Vertigo Comics picks, then you'll love what I've got coming in this video. From jumping out of terrorist planes to oppressed fairy tale characters, this video has it all. Anyway, that's the intro, let's get stuck in. Number 15, Air. Air was an ongoing comic book series published by Vertigo Comics. It was written by writer G. Willow Wilson and illustrated by artist M.K. Perker. Air is where the word bizarre is taken to the nth degree. Blythe, an acrophobic flight attendant for the fictional Clearfleet Airlines, is invited to join the Etesian Front, which claims to be an anti-terrorist organisation, which is in fact the exact opposite. The Etesians trick Blythe into transporting plans for a terrorist attack. When she discovers this, she and a man named Zane are kidnapped and taken on board the plane that is the hijacked target. Later, Zane and Blythe leap clear of the plane as it crashes into the sea. The head of the Etesian Front, a man named Benjamin Lancaster, also survives. Zane is later accosted by Lancaster in Narromar, a place that ostensibly disappeared from maps during the 1947 partition of India, and interrogated as to the whereabouts of an Aztec artifact. Blythe follows him to Narromar, where she is designated by the Etesian Front a hyperpract. Basically, it's someone with the power to move into different dimensions or realities. Confused yet? Number 14, Bite Club. Bite Club is a Vertigo comic book miniseries published by Vertigo Comics. It's created by writers Howard Chaykin and David Tishman. Bite Club is a crime story in which the protagonists are vampires living in Miami, Florida. In the past, co-writer Chaykin has said the comic was a metaphor for racial profiling and the immigrant experience. Set after the murder of vampire crime boss Eduardo del Toro, his heirs and relatives begin to make a play for control of his organization. To their dismay, Toro, in his will, named his youngest son, a Roman Catholic priest and vampire named Leto, as his successor. What follows can best be described as Vampire Godfather, as numerous vampire relatives and factions vie for control of the vampire mafia, leading to the question, who wins out and becomes the ultimate vampire godfather? You'll have to read the comic book to find out. Number 13, Deadman. The fourth series of Deadman was published by Vertigo Comics, perhaps because it featured a sort of superhero who was dead and existed on another plane. Who the hell knows? It has certainly become a fan favourite over recent years. In the Bruce Jones version, airline pilot Brandon Casey is killed, and after refusing to pass on into another life, he accepts this new half-life, half-death existence. Conceptually a bit like Spawn, except not. Thankfully, there's very little superhero entanglement, and instead it's more of a drama/thriller involving those that Brandon Casey left behind. Number 12, The Extremist. The Extremist was a 4-issue comic book miniseries written by Peter Milligan with art by Ted McKeever. Those who watched my first video will remember I teased this one. In short, if you're after sleaze, sex clubs and offensive meandering, then The Extremist is one to watch out for in the bargain bin. Funny enough, it was originally created by Brendan McCarthy, who gave it to Peter Milligan to develop as a comic series because he couldn't be bothered to draw it. Cue laughing here. Number 11, Federal Bureau of Physics, FBP. Federal Bureau of Physics was an American comic book series by Simon Oliver and Robbie Rodriguez, distributed by Vertigo Comics. FBP imagines a world where disturbances in the laws of physics are as common as weather and necessitate forecasts about wormhole locations, momentary gravity losses, and entropy reversals. With much fanfare, the government creates a new bureaucratic organisation to deal with quantum disturbances, the Federal Bureau of Physics, because that's what America needs, another government agency. The FBP storyline follows Special Agent Adam Hardy as he deals with internal departmental battles and increasingly dangerous and radical quantum disasters. And if you think that description is wild, then wait until you see the colour scheme. Number 10, Greatest Hits. Greatest Hits is a 6-issue comic book limited series published in 2008 by Vertigo Comics. The series was written by David Tishman with the art by Glenn Fabry. The main character team are the Mates. While there are parallels with the Beatles and each character is a pastiche of a superhero, Tishman insisted the concept was much broader than that. Still, this defiance didn't stop the first issue of Greatest Hits from receiving average reviews from critics like the Comics Bulletin. Greatest Hits is told through Come Together, a behind-the-music-like documentary looking back on the team directed by Nick Mansfield, the son of one of the Mates. It then relates the history of the fictional universes through the decades, each one bringing their own types of superhero. Number 9, Joe the Barbarian. Joe the Barbarian was an 8-issue comic book limited series written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Sean Murphy. Joe is a teenage boy with type 1 diabetes. When his blood sugar drops and he enters a state of hypoglycemia, he begins to hallucinate and enters a fantasy world populated with his toys and other fantasy characters. Here he becomes embroiled in a war with King Death, while in the real world he searches for a soda to fix his blood sugar. Sounds like my type of guy. Hint, hint. Joe knows there is one in the kitchen downstairs, but it is extremely far away, made farther by his medical condition affecting his mobility. Joe the Barbarian was collected into a single 224-page volume back in 2011. Highly recommended for anyone looking for a lighter slice of the proverbial Grant Morrison cake. Number 8, Rogan Gosh. Rogan Gosh is the title of a British comic book story written by Peter Milligan and illustrated by Brendan McCarthy. Originally serialized in the 2000 AD spin-off title Revolver in 1990, Rogan Gosh was later collected into a single edition by Vertigo Comics. Described as an Indian science fiction series, the story is an example of Milligan and McCarthy's postmodernist psychedelic style of storyline, described by some readers as confusing or challenging, albeit a tad insensitive. The name is a play on Rogan Josh, an Indian curry dish. Yeah, that didn't age well. So we're about to hit the top 7, but before we do, I'd be keen to know if any of these comics are new to you or if they're classics you've read 100 times. Sound out in the comics. As we tackle the top 7, let's get back into it. Number 7, Vimanarama. Vimanarama was a 3-issue comic book miniseries written by Grant Morrison, art by Philip Bond, and published by Vertigo Comics, set in the United Kingdom. Again, really? It follows the story of Ali, a British Asian man who must confront ancient monsters inspired by Indian folklore, as well as more mundane crises in his family and personal life. In addition to the mundane BS in his life, Ali must confront a team of ancient and somewhat naive superheroes who are the only ones that can stop ancient monsters unleashed upon the world by a baby in Ali's family. If you're getting mad Jack Kirby-like vibes, then you're on the right track, as this is as close to the Eternals as Grant Morrison has ever gone. There's also a dash of Arabian Nights-style romance thrown in this haphazard mix of psychedelia and general oddness. Number 6, Spaceman. Spaceman was a 9-issue science fiction comic book miniseries written by Brian Azzarello, illustrated by Eduardo Risso, and published by Vertigo Comics. Set in a post-apocalyptic near future, Spaceman tells the story of Orson, a hulking, lonely man who was genetically engineered by NASA to sustain long-term spaceflight. Flashbacks show Orson and other engineered participants of the project living and working on Mars. After NASA shuts down, however, Orson lives alone on Earth, salvaging scrap metal for a living. That is until he finds himself at the center of a celebrity child kidnapping case. Brian Azzarello fans who will note his recent fan favorite series like Faithless, Boom Studios, and Batman, Damned, DC Comics, will find it interesting that the first issue of Spaceman sold for only $1. Inflation be damned. Number 5, Otherworld. Otherworld is a creator-owned miniseries by writer/artist Phil Jimenez, which was released in 2005. The book was described by Jimenez as the real world meets The Lord of the Rings meets Tron. Otherworld is an epic, multi-part space opera about a group of Los Angeles college students who find themselves on the front lines of an interdimensional border war. Otherworld revolves around 19-year-old Siobhan Munyehan, a student at the fictional University of Los Angeles and the progressive lead singer of a burgeoning LA band, and her boyfriend and rival, Jason Ang. Siobhan is an incredibly powerful sorceress descended from a mystic lineage millennia old, and alone holds the key to stopping the impending war in Otherworld, the Celtic land of magic and the dead. Drafted into the same conflict, Jason, a brilliant young man whose worldview is more clearly delineated in black and white, assumes control of the military forces of Siobhan's enemies, the technocracy, its basic good versus evil trope. My race versus your race. Very American. Number 4, Nemivore. Nemivore was a 6-issue horror comic book limited series published under the Vertigo imprint of DC Comics from June 2005. Nemivore was co-written by Ray Fawkes and Hans Rodionoff and illustrated with painted covers by Mike Huddleston. The story focuses on Kaylee Markowicz, a young snowboarder who suffers a career-ending head injury during a competition and loses part of her memory. While trying to recuperate from her head trauma, she discovers that the memories of others are being consumed by an ancient monster known as the Nemivore. Kaylee's amnesia leaves her immune to the monster's attacks and the only one who can stop it. In October 2007 at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in Portland, Oregon, the Nemivore co-creator Hans Rodionoff screened a 10-minute sample reel for a proposed feature film based on the comic book. The sample reel featured Kristen Bell as Kaylee Markowicz and Michael Biehn as her therapist. Rodionoff stated that the film would have been executive produced by Guillermo del Toro and produced by Don Murphy and Susan Montford. Rodionoff had written the script and was set to direct as well. However, the film was never completed. Seriously, robbed, I tell ya, robbed. Number 3, Flex Mentallo. If you're familiar with the well-documented fictional history of the Doom Patrol,
Jesus, knock it off!
Then you probably recognize the lead character in this comic. But for those unfamiliar, Flex Mentallo was a comic book series and character created by writer Grant Morrison, drawn, at least for this series, by Frank Quietly. Just like in the original run of Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol, there's lots of flexing. So much flexing, in fact, your hands will probably tense up as you hold on to Flex Mentallo. Number 2, The Dreaming. If you've been beating around the Neil Gaiman bush, then you've probably put 2 and 2 together to work out The Dreaming is Sandman related, and you're right, The Dreaming was an anthology series of sorts set in the Sandman universe, and due to its anthological, if that's even a word, nature, it was drawn and coloured by many artists, too many to mention. Sadly, Neil Gaiman was quick to undo the events of the Dreaming comics with the publication of Endless Nights, set just 1 year after the Dreaming ended, meaning the events in the Dreaming were largely ignored in Endless Nights and consequently made the entire volume of the Dreaming largely irrelevant. such as the death of Matthew the Raven and later the 2018 rendition of The Dreaming, which pretty much scrubbed the entire original run. Was this Neil Gaiman's way of flipping the bird to editor Elisa Whitney and co? Yes. Is Neil Gaiman still a bastard? Also yes. Number 1, Fables. Fables is one of the most commercially successful Vertigo Comics series. Bill Willingham served as sole writer for the entire Fables run, with Mark Buckingham penciling more than 110 issues. The series featured various other pencilers over the years, most notably Lan Medina and Steve Leialoha. Fables was launched in July 2002 and concluded in July 2015. However, in June 2021, it was announced that Fables would be getting revived in 2022 with a 12-issue continuation to the main series, as well as a 6-issue spin-off miniseries. As the name would suggest, Fables features various characters from fairy tales and folklore, referring to themselves as Fables, who formed a clandestine community centuries ago within New York City known as Fabletown, after their homelands were conquered by a mysterious and deadly enemy known as the Adversary. Fables follows several of Fabletown's legal representatives, such as Sheriff Bigby Wolf, Deputy Mayor Snow White, her sister Rose Red, Prince Charming, and Boy Blue, as they deal with troublesome fables and try to solve conflicts in both Fabletown and The Farm, a hidden town in upstate New York for fables unable to blend in with human society. Does the Adversary return in the series? Of course. It's comics. So that's the end of another volume of the weirdest and most forgotten Vertigo comics. Were there any that you've never read before? Let me know below. If you want to help the channel, then turn on notifications and chuck me a hype. I've linked volume 1 in the comments, but that's it for now. See you guys next time for the next episode.